What if the only thing standing between you and your most creative, meaningful life is fear pretending to protect you? Not fear of danger, not fear that keeps you alive, but the quiet, everyday fear that whispers, "Don't try, don't risk, don't hope too much." In Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert makes a bold promise. She says creativity does not belong only to artists, geniuses, or the chosen few. It belongs to anyone willing to live a life guided by curiosity instead of fear. And this book is not about mastering talent. It is about mastering courage. This is a book for anyone who has ever felt a spark of inspiration and then talked themselves out of following it. Anyone who has ever wondered what might happen if they finally said yes. Part 1. Courage. Elizabeth Gilbert begins Big Magic with a question that quietly challenges the way most people live their lives. Do you have the courage to bring forth the treasures hidden inside you? To explore this question, she introduces the life of the poet Jack Gilbert. Despite having the talent, charisma, and early success that could have made him famous, Jack deliberately chose a different path. He lived simply, often in isolation, writing poetry not for applause or recognition, but out of devotion. His life was not loud or visible, but it was deeply intentional. Through him, Elizabeth Gilbert reframed success. A meaningful creative life is not defined by attention or rewards, but by sincerity and courage. From this story, she establishes her core belief: every human being carries buried treasure. Creativity is not something reserved for a gifted few. It is a natural part of being human. The universe, she suggests, hides these inner treasures within us and waits to see whether we are brave enough to go searching for them. Creative living, in her definition, is not about becoming an artist in the professional sense. It is about choosing curiosity over fear. It is about asking what makes you feel alive and following that pull, even if it leads nowhere impressive or profitable. She emphasizes this by sharing the story of a woman who returned to figure skating in midlife. This woman did not skate to compete or to win. She skated because it made her feel light, joyful, and whole. Gilbert presents this as a perfect example of creative living. Creativity exists to expand our experience of being alive, not to justify our worth. After establishing this expansive definition of creativity, Gilbert turns her attention to the greatest obstacle standing in its way: fear. Fear, she explains, appears in endless disguises. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of embarrassment, fear of wasting time, fear of not being talented enough, fear that someone else has already done it better, fear that it is too late to begin or too early to be taken seriously. Fear feels powerful because it speaks in urgency. It presents itself as wisdom and protection. But Gilbert dismantles this illusion by pointing out something important. Fear is unimaginative. It says the same thing every time. Stop. Don't move. Don't risk. Fear is ancient and automatic. It evolved to protect us from physical danger, not from creative risk. In creative matters, fear offers no insight, no nuance, and no originality. Gilbert does not suggest eliminating fear. She argues that fear is necessary for survival. But creativity does not require fear's guidance. Fear can come along, but it cannot be in charge. She introduces a powerful metaphor. Fear is allowed to sit in the car, but it is not allowed to drive. It may speak, complain, and panic, but it is never allowed to make decisions. Courage, in Big Magic, is not about becoming fearless. It is about learning to move forward even while fear is present. A creative life is not possible without fear, but it is destroyed when fear takes control. Part 2. Enchantment. Once fear is acknowledged and put in its place, Elizabeth Gilbert turns toward what she calls enchantment. This is where Big Magic takes its most unconventional turn. She proposes that creativity is not entirely human. Ideas, she believes, exist independently of us. They are energetic forces searching for human collaborators who are willing to bring them into reality. An idea does not belong to you, she argues. An idea visits you. When an idea arrives, it announces itself physically and emotionally. There is excitement, obsession, nervous energy, and an almost romantic intensity. Gilbert describes this as the unmistakable feeling of inspiration. But ideas are not passive. They have intention. They want to be made manifest, and if ignored, they move on. She illustrates this through the story of a novel she once planned to write about the Amazon jungle. She committed to the idea, researched it deeply, and even sold the proposal. But life intervened. The project was abandoned for years. When she returned to it, the idea was gone. The research remained, but the living spark had vanished. Eventually, she discovered that another writer had written a remarkably similar novel. Instead of reacting with bitterness or jealousy, Gilbert chose to interpret this as proof of her belief. The idea had simply found another collaborator who was ready. This perspective dissolves creative scarcity. There is no single chance, no stolen idea, no final opportunity. Ideas circulate constantly. They reward availability, attention, and commitment. Gilbert encourages treating ideas with respect. When inspiration arrives, listen carefully. When it asks for your effort, answer honestly. If you say yes, you must show up. Saying no is allowed. Ignoring ideas is allowed. But complaining about missed opportunities is not. Ideas respond to action, not longing. Part 3. Permission. In Part 3, Gilbert addresses one of the most deeply rooted creative barriers, the belief that we need permission. Permission from family. Permission from society. Permission from education, money, or success. She challenges the assumption that creativity must be validated in order to be legitimate. You do not need credentials to create. You do not need an audience. You do not need proof that it will matter. Creativity does not require justification. Gilbert dismantles the belief that creative pursuits must be serious, profound, or world-changing. Creativity can be playful. It can be small. It can exist purely for pleasure. She also confronts the cultural myth of the suffering artist. The idea that pain, addiction, and torment are the price of creative greatness. While suffering may accompany life, she argues that it is not a requirement for meaningful creative work. You are allowed to enjoy creativity. You are allowed to feel lightness. You are allowed to create without punishment. Permission, she concludes, is not something you wait for. It is something you give yourself. The moment you stop asking for approval, creative energy begins to move. And that decision, simple as it sounds, changes everything. Part 4. Persistence. In Part 4, Elizabeth Gilbert shifts from inspiration to endurance. If courage gets you started and permission allows you to begin, persistence is what carries creativity forward when the excitement fades. She makes a crucial distinction here. Talent is not the rarest creative resource. Persistence is. Many people begin creative projects. Very few stay with them. Not because they lack ability, but because they underestimate how ordinary, repetitive, and sometimes dull the creative process can be. Creative work, Gilbert explains, is not a constant state of passion. It is often quiet, sometimes frustrating, sometimes boring. There are long stretches where nothing seems to work, where progress feels invisible, and where doubt grows louder. This is the moment when most people quit. Fear often reappears during this phase, disguised as perfectionism. It convinces you that your work is not good enough, not original enough, not worthy of continuing. It suggests that quitting is a form of wisdom. Gilbert argues the opposite. Quitting prematurely damages confidence. Finishing, even imperfectly, builds trust in yourself. She encourages lowering the stakes. Create badly. Create clumsily. Create things that may never be seen. The goal is not perfection. The goal is completion. Persistence, in this sense, is an act of defiance. It is the choice to keep going even when the work no longer feels magical. Especially when it no longer feels magical. Creative mastery is not built through bursts of inspiration, but through repeated return. Showing up again and again, without drama, without expectations, simply because you said you would. Part 5, Trust. Part 5 explores trust. Trust in yourself, trust in creativity, and trust in the long-term process. Gilbert warns against tying creative worth to external outcomes. Success and failure are unreliable measures. Praise is fleeting. Criticism is inevitable. Recognition is inconsistent. If your motivation depends on applause, your creative life will remain fragile. Instead, she urges trust and devotion. Trust that showing up matters even when nothing visible comes from it. Trust that effort has value independent of results. She also addresses the fear of judgment and invisibility. Many people hesitate to create because they fear being seen, or worse, being ignored. Gilbert reframes this fear by reminding us that creativity does not promise attention. It promises engagement. A creative life, she says, is not a guarantee of fame. It is a guarantee of aliveness. By trusting the process rather than the outcome, creativity becomes sustainable. You stop bargaining with it. You stop demanding rewards. You begin to participate more fully. Trust also means accepting uncertainty. You will not always know where your work is going. You will not always understand its value in the moment. Creativity asks you to move forward without full clarity. That uncertainty is not a flaw. It is the nature of the work. Part 6, Divinity. In the final part of Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert speaks about creativity as a sacred relationship. She does not frame this in religious terms, but in human ones. Creativity, she suggests, connects us to something larger than our fear, our ego, and our self-doubt. When we create, we step outside our narrow concerns and participate in something expansive. We become collaborators with life itself. Gilbert argues that creative living is an act of service. By bringing what is inside us into the world, we add beauty, curiosity, and possibility to the shared human experience. You do not need to be extraordinary to do this. You do not need to be original in a grand sense. You only need to be sincere. Creative living is not about legacy. It is about presence. When fear is no longer in charge, when persistence becomes habit, and when trust replaces expectation, creativity becomes a way of being. Not something you chase, something you practice. And in that practice, Gilbert suggests there's something quietly divine. Big Magic leaves us with a simple but powerful message. Your life is rare. Your curiosity matters. Your creativity is not a luxury. It is a way of engaging fully with the world. Fear will always be present. Let it sit in the passenger seat. But let curiosity drive. Because the treasure's hidden inside, you are hoping you will say yes.